G'day, Lucas Murkoff here, CEO and co-founder of Tribune. I've got the amazing guest with me today, Bret Erickson from an MSP over in the States, and I'll let him jump on in and introduce himself in a sec. As you might be aware, we're doing this Msp Roadshow, what we'll call the virtual roadshow, globally, introducing and I don't really want to use the word interviewing, but having a general open conversation around all things tech, all things MSPs and innovation into the future. And the main purpose of this is to get a really good understanding of what an MSP looks like inside and out, the good, bad, and the ugly, what we love in the industry, what we don't like in the industry, and what we see moving forward into the future. It's a super open conversation, raw, no BS. We're here just to I guess, uncover every aspect of an MSP. And in this case, I've got Bret on the call with us today, and I'd love him to introduce us. Take it away, mate.
Hey, Lucas. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, Bret Erickson. We're in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which for those of you who don't know is dead center in the middle of the country, right at the top. Nice and cold, lots of snow. We are all very relieved that it's starting to get a little warmer here. It's like almost 50 degrees today, which is a big treat. Yeah, own a small MSP, and we're 11, about to be 12 people, and started off real small, started off one person. Actually 2 people, and so lots of growth over the years, lots of tools, and excited to talk tech with you.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. I will kick it off. I guess let's dive into a bit of your background, how you got into the MSP industry in the first place, and then what your journey has been over the few decades that you've been in the industry. So, mate, let's start there before I get into it. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's a second career for me. First 10 years of my professional life, I played in a band. I'm a drummer, still play, and so we did a lot of traveling and recorded and kind of crazy guys on the road having a good time, and so that was like the first 10 years of my professional life, and then the band started slowing down. Everybody kind of got jobs or went to school. I had a chance to go to school for IT. So a year of networking and a year of programming. And my uncle owned Passkey. So he caught wind that I was going to school for computers and was like, oh, why don't you come intern for me? I'd be happy to keep you busy and get some experience. And I barely even knew what my uncle did. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, I was kind of school during the day, school in the morning, and then work at Passkey in the afternoon. And, I didn't know anything. Came in super green, and it was a good situation because I was able to dive into situations that you probably wouldn't see if you're entry level at most businesses, especially working in a large corporation. It's kind of working next side by side with my uncle, total like apprentice situation in a way. And that was great. And years of that, probably 7, 8 years of that. And then he sold to us in 2007. So we're coming up on 14 years here of owning it. And well, I'm glossing over a lot of details, but that's the gist of it. School, intern, work, buy the business, grow it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been what, 23, 24 years then since you've been in the industry.
Yep, 98. I was kind of joking.
Yeah.
When we were in school, Windows 98 was just coming out, the launch of Windows 98 when I started. So
yeah, wow. So you've seen a lot of change and a lot of innovation in that period of time. Yeah,
big
cool.
time.
Love it. So you mentioned you started out, I guess, back in working with your uncles, just the few of you by the sounds of it, and then you started gradually growing. You got 12 techs now. How have you seen that process, like going from like you were the technician, you were on the tools doing the actual day-to-day, and then you've transitioned into being a business owner. How's that been for you? And are you still on tools today, or are you more of an overarching support for the rest of the team?
Well, it's great. A lot of great questions in there. I think it's important to stay in IT. I think I'll always want to stay in the know and stay fascinated and curious about change. And I saw something where somebody just retired and his slogan or his tagline was, never ask anybody to do something you haven't done yourself. Well, that's kind of impossible to really live 100% by, but I like that idea of like, I'd kind of like to learn everything about 365, learn about Azure P1 and P2, learn about endpoint, learn about all these new tools. Even if I'm not doing them every day, I feel like if you get too far away from those tools, number one, your sales ability goes down the drain because you don't know, a lot of the sales benefit of an owner or a tech is just that honesty, just that, like, I use these tools, I know how they work. So you lose a bit of an edge there, and you also lose your ability to talk to your techs and talk nuts and bolts. So I think, yes, I'm an IT-based, tech-based owner, owner operator, if you will, but I don't ever see myself getting out of that. As much as you do get pulled into process, and you get pulled into efficiency, and you get pulled into sales, and you get pulled into picking tools and all these other things, I want to make sure that I'm still taking tickets every once in a while and sitting on the help desk, so to speak. So yeah, that's my long answer. Is I do.
Yeah, sounds like it's good to get your hands dirty, because if you get your hands dirty, you understand what's happening in the industry. I guess what your clients like, what your clients don't like. At the end of the day, you see it firsthand, and then it sounds like you also then mentor your team down that direction too, right? Because you're all doing, I guess, bits and pieces of the entire puzzle. Do you think that's a long-term play? Like, you're at 12 techs now. Are you wanting to keep growing, and do you think that's possible long-term? Or do you think it's just...
That's good, boy. That's good ones. That was another direction I was going to go when you asked that first question. Is slow growth, right? I mean, do I think we're going to grow? Yeah, I do, but I'm not like on a crazy path where I want to, get 500,000 or $1 million of capital funding and hire 5 guys I don't have the business for and hire 2 salespeople and just go for it. I really, in order to maintain our level of quality, and because we're definitely a higher end MSP. I mean, they talk about churn in our industry. I try not to have any churn. I'm not like trying to grab clients, and then if a few leave, no big deal. I want the higher end, long term, and I think slow growth is the way to go with that, as opposed to like rapid hire a bunch of people and a lot of sales and things like that. It's funny when you first said mentoring. I've got some stuff written on my whiteboard right above me that I'm looking at, and one of them is coach. Just coach the guys. Keep in mind, pass it on, coach. You think that you undervalue yourself, I think, a lot. Like, if you're my personality, like, these guys know that stuff. They don't. They don't have 23 years. They didn't deal with a lot of things we dealt with 20 years ago. So spreading that knowledge and being there for them and being really open, open door policy and what have you. And as far as the growth, it's really been like, we started off with an intern. So I bought it from my uncle, and I had an assistant, and I hired an intern, right? And he was, I think, only a half a day. And then when he got done with school, he went full time. And then slowly we went to 2 techs, and then slowly we went to 3. So you could say, I don't know if you ever heard, you want your belt and your suspenders too, for guys who don't take risks. So I'd say I'm a little bit of that, like, measured risk belt and suspenders guy, but I also want to keep driving and keep growing and keep building. So just finding the balance between those two.
It's all about sustainability, right? And where your personality fits and your risk factor at the end of the day. If you're still in business now, 23 years later. And it just goes to show that having that conservative mindset and really looking after your customer database as it is, not trying to churn and burn, let's call it, go out and get heaps of sales and win heaps of customers and win heaps of projects, and then bring them all into the team, and the team are like struggling and overwhelmed and they can't deliver properly, and like it just has this whole diverse effect, which just goes to show, like, when I say you're still in business, after this many years later. COVID was like, I don't know if this was like yourself, but like personally here in Australia, and most businesses were like, that first 3 to 4 weeks when COVID hit, it was like, what the hell, have we just all lost our businesses? Like, what the hell's happening right now?
Yeah.
So I'm keen to hear it from you firsthand, what you went through personally in the business with your staff, like how, emotionally, physically, how was it over there?
Yeah, so it was quite the opposite for us for about a month, and then it became that. Then it became like, oh my God, where are we going from here? Is anybody ever going to spend any money anymore? The first 3 to 4 weeks when people started started going remote. We're in Minnesota, so we get a lot of snow and we get a lot of ice days, and so we're already very adept at working from home. So almost everybody had remote access of some sort. principals, key players in businesses have that, but not so much like assistants or customer service representatives or, general employees. So the race to get everybody to remote in and be able to work from home, it was just insane. I mean, I would literally go home at night and I would look at our ticket board and I would write an email to everybody thanking them for working their tails off all day long. We'll get through this. And then I would prioritize and say, nobody takes any new tickets until we do these in this order. Because otherwise people were like jumping ahead, people were jumping in line. I'm like, we were so overloaded. It was great. I mean, our utilization was like 110%, You're usually shooting for 70% utilization, 80% utilization. These guys are like 110, 120% utilization, right? So it was good to have business, but it was too stressful. But you felt good. You felt a lot of appreciation, a lot of like, I can't believe this is happening. Thanks so much for getting us remoting. And then once everybody was in remote, there was a little bit of the like, okay, great, we did that. Now, how do we secure it? Like, do we do this in a bad way? Is this our best situation? So there's a little bit of security. But then projects just dried up. I don't know how it was for you out there, but everybody froze their budget. I mean, I am in a couple other organizations and other interests where I know for a fact that a couple of the bigger organizations here in town literally said, we're not spending a nickel. Hiring freeze, everything freeze, right? And so for a small business too, they need 10 new computers this year. Well, guess what? It's waiting. Or they need this new server, it's waiting. Or the watch guard is up for renewal. What do we really use that for? Well, you need it for this. I mean, do we really need it? So it was thin for a while. But our support stayed pretty steady, and our remote support stayed so heavy that I think we were flat. People talk about that like we were flat, and that was a blessing. I don't know. We didn't really take a dip, but we certainly weren't like, I know we worked for a couple businesses that were on fire and still are because of it, like doing really, really well because of it. So
it's affected every industry slightly differently, and some have boomed and some have just crashed, right? I guess to your first point and question, this is where I guess we internally felt like we've lost our business because a large part of our organization was consulting. And so because a large was consulting, literally $1 million pipeline gone overnight. And so when you lose your pipeline overnight, you're like, holy shit, what the hell's going to happen? Yeah. And then obviously that it's a roll-on effect to the staff and the morale. And I guess we're lucky, after you build up a really good culture over the years, you just all band together and you do what you have to do to get, just get shit done, and stay on top of it. But it's always, we haven't experienced this type of environment before, right? This whole pandemic scenario. And so it's interesting to see how we react as leaders, as business owners, as you said, as coaches. And it's also interesting to see how your team react to the situation. It sounds like from your point you mentioned before, your team just band together. Utilization was up to 110%. They just got shit done. They just got onto it and they just made it happen, right? Obviously, it's not long term because you'll just burn out. You can't do that forever. But it's good to hear that you've built that culture over the years that just everyone just got in and got what they needed done.
We took on some internal projects, and I'm really happy that we did that. We took on one of the biggest things. We took on a service delivery project where we're Autotask. So we are working with another company that local consultants. So you can give them a plug. It's they're now called Accelerated Global, I think. It's basically Stephen and Carol. Used to be Boise. I think it's Boise Consulting. Anyways, working with them, doing a ton of service delivery work, like redefining Autotask, building out reports, building out SLAs, building out dashboards, estimating time on tickets, utilization per guy. And we dedicated a lot, and we still are dedicating a lot of time to that. So you try and take advantage of that downtime. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes you get so busy, you're just not able to get anything done. I mean, you get to the end of the day and you're like, holy cow, I didn't even start my to-do list, So trying to take advantage of it. One of my texts, we were talking the other day, and he said, my wife says we're going to miss this pandemic. not gonna miss all of it, but there'll be little parts of this pandemic you're gonna miss, and that's probably one of them, is having a little bit of spare time and actually being able to step back and breathe and work. The classic E-myth thing, like work on the business instead of in the business. So,
yeah, I think you're right. There was moments after the panic, just kind of died down a bit, and we could actually focus back on the business. When you're not doing a lot of projects work, you know how much time and effort projects take up mentally. Just managing, you don't have that on your books. You don't have to focus on it. So you're right. You do internal projects, which allows you to actually work on the business. We never set enough time aside to actually work on the business. It's especially being a tech myself and similar to yourself. Like when you're an engineer, you love just getting in and fixing shit. And if you can't, if you start working on the business, you're like, oh, but I really just want to solve that problem. So it's always a catch-22.
Fire. You're always fighting fires, right? It's always the biggest fire, the biggest plume of smoke you're going after, right? So, which rightfully so, but yeah.
So if we just go back a step to the projects that dried up, was that a massive hit to you from a revenue perspective? Were you worried about the business because sometimes your MRR might not be high enough to cover everything, and you need to top it up with projects every single month? How did that look? How was that?
Yeah, that wasn't as bad as you would think, or as I would have thought. I actually just looked at our numbers too long ago, and I figured our top line was going to be way down because of our hardware sales, and it really wasn't. So I think we made up some ground later at the end of the year. Yeah, it was a little thin. Like I say, we were doing internal things, as far as like staff. I'll take that piece to the staffing piece. Do you let somebody go, or do you let a couple guys go when you're slow? And we managed to not, and I could have, but we tried to just make a run for it. You see some of these guys, the restaurant owners, like, I'm keeping everybody on staff. I'm paying them out of my retirement, right? I wouldn't be able to go that far. Not that I'm not that generous, but that's something I couldn't do. But we did commit to keeping guys. It felt like you got to a point where I'm like finally staffed up and have the right people. And when this happens, I'm like, I'm not just going to let somebody go. So yeah, it was
become a part of your family, right?
What's that?
Your team could become a part of your family. Yeah. And so it's like, what's that whole catch-22 scenario where you, from a culture perspective and a family perspective, you really want to keep them on board, but from a business perspective, and you look at the numbers, you're like, I can't keep them on board. So you're like conflicting with what you should do.
Yep. So we just okay. So I'm big into process, or maybe I'm not real. It's funny with me. There's an interesting dynamic because I own this company, and every once in a while I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a drummer. I'm a musician. I spent the first 10 years of my life like literally recording, touring, and that's it, right? I've been no business school. I mean, obviously, like the band was a business, and I was like in charge of talking to AR, in charge of talking to booking. So of course there was business, but there's no business school background. It's like, how the heck did I get here, right? And I think that's part of my fascination with process, systems, efficiency. It's also important. And one of my favorite sayings, my brother-in-law said this to me years and years and years ago: don't jump over dollars for nickels. Right? And we so often jump over dollars for nickels and just like do inefficient things. And so I'm always looking for tools, I mean, we're talking about tools, and obviously your tool is like, how can we utilize Autotask or utilize RMM or utilize just anything to cut time, not quality, but just cut engineer time or administrative time to make things more efficient. So
efficiency is definitely key, especially when you've got the situation where you all just need to band together and you've got too much on your plate. You got to turn to efficiency. If we change gears and talk about, I guess, the future, and you've got through the pandemic, and pandemic hopefully is not too far to be over in the US. I see we're up to 50 million vaccines now, so cross fingers it won't be too far away.
Yeah.
So you can actually live a life again and get out of your house, which would be ideal. So think about
Jump in right there. Yeah, it's weird. Just the last few weeks, and now it's gotten a little warmer, so it's better. I really started to just grate on me the whole I just want to go to a movie, you know. Just want to get, just especially in the winter in Minnesota. I mean, there's plenty of winter sports, and you get out, but you really love your like sports games. We got a professional basketball team, professional, hockey team here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do during the winter, and there's like none of that's available. So yeah, it was definitely getting old. And big news yesterday from the Biden administration that they're doing some things with factories to be able to Merck. I don't know how much you follow this, but Merck is going to partner with Johnson & Johnson to make a ton more vaccines, and they're going to open up a couple other factories, and they pushed up the potential date for when everybody in America could get a vaccine, every adult. The number would be there at least to the end of May, which is up 2 months. So yeah, it's exciting stuff. Nice. You got, not to flip it around on you, but you've been in a whole different situation over there. I mean, it's been a lot better managed, right?
Yeah, well, not just a lot better managed, but I guess we're on an island, right? And because we're on an island and there's only 23 million of us, or whatever the number is these days, like it's a different situation. And yeah, the government did 100% lockdown straight away. No travel in, no travel out. We couldn't even travel between the states. So, we've only got a handful of states when you've got 52. So like everything was just literally locked down to the nth degree. And so that allowed us to still live a life. Okay, we've had bits and pieces of situations, like Melbourne was probably the worst hit with our lockdown for like 8 months. But majority of the case, especially where I am based in Brisbane and Queensland, Australia, it's people ask me this question all the time, and I've been doing these, online Zoom meetings with, lots of investors in the US and over in Europe and MSPs globally, and they always laugh at us and jealous. And I'm walking along the river and I'm on my phone or whatever. It's like our life hasn't changed. Like we have been so lucky. When people are trying to book a meeting, it's like, no, I've got a date night. We're going out to a restaurant. I'm like, going to a restaurant? What? Like our life has not changed, and it's like, because we're meant to be living in the US, right this second. We're meant to move there.
You were mentioning that.
Yeah, when the pandemic hit. And I just have to, it's so grateful for being in this country where they just, I guess, took the initiative to just shut everything down immediately. And so we didn't get into the roll-on effect of what's happened, especially in the States, but then obviously over in UK as well. Just grateful for, I guess, having that, living in a country where they just took the initiative, and they just didn't really, there was no option. there was no politics. There was no question about it. It was just like, this is what we're doing.
It's just an amazing place. I know a little bit about it. I really want to travel there someday. And, I'm a diver. We talked about that a little bit, and obviously New Zealand being pretty close to, and you talking about traveling to some of the nearby places, in the not South Pacific, but just north of you, and it just sounds like an amazing part of the world.
Yeah, just all the islands, to be able to go for a dive, beautiful. And hopefully we'll come up May, June, July. Then it sounds like the US will be a bit more under control, and then you can start traveling again by the sounds of it. So we just cross our fingers that the vaccine does what it says it does, and hopefully there's not a third or a fourth or fifth wave, in 6 months from now. So let's just play it by ear and see how it rolls out. But hey, it's good that they've released those new factories, and if you go from 50 million to 150 million in the next few months, that's pretty epic. That's a lot.
Don't you think that this is going to maybe be in the back of everybody's head? Let's say the pandemic is over and doesn't come back for years. Don't you still think decades, maybe not decades, but at least another decade, that'll be in the back of everybody's head as they think about office space, technologies, remote access to data? I mean, this is going to be burned in as far as making decisions.
Because the decisions have already been made, like listen to a lot of tech podcasts I listen to in the States. It's just interesting. All the major tech organizations have already put a work from home policy in place. They've shut offices down, like where they have thousands of staff in an office, completely gone, never opening again. Everyone's completely remote working now. It's given an opportunity. What I've been fascinated about listening to and learning is, say you're in Minnesota, but you've always wanted to go and live in Austin or go and live in the bush land somewhere in the mountains. People are now doing it. And so they're literally relocating their entire life. Their world doesn't change. because technology allows them to live and work from anywhere, right? And so people have always wanted. It's happening here in Australia too. So Queensland is like the sunshine. They call it the Sunshine State. It's very similar to California, maybe down the end of Florida, where it's always sunny. It's a beautiful place to be. And yet you've got other parts of the country where it's like, not so much snowing, but, cold and windy and wet. And so the migration we're seeing and the property prices just going through the roof right now. Everyone wants to move from every other part of the country in Australia to Queensland. Because they've been talking it with their families for years, and they're like, every Christmas go, oh yeah, we should really move there. And it's 10 years later and they do nothing. Pandemic hits, they just move. Because people are like, okay, yeah, you can still stay employed. You don't have to live in Sydney anymore. You don't have to live in Melbourne. You can you go live wherever and you can keep working. So I think you're right. It's here to stay. If we talk about like the tech allows us to communicate, collaborate, work efficiently anywhere in the world. What's going to be super interesting is what does that have an effect on our mental state? Where we're used to being in an office, having face-to-face collaboration, being around people. This is now the new norm, what we're doing right now. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on around it.
As you were talking right there, what I thought of is, I don't know if you caught Ignite. I don't know if you caught much of Microsoft Ignite, but yesterday the Microsoft Mesh. Have you seen Mesh much?
Dean, our CTO, co-founder of Tribune, was filling us in. He was watching the re-recording of it. There's heaps of new cool collaboration and connectivity products that we're releasing.
It's like Oculus meets Teams meets just Microsoft tool. It's kind of stuff you watch and you're like, yeah, right. I mean, these demos and what you can do, it's like, okay, would you really do that? Or maybe not for the next decade, but it's pretty cool the way, hologram and HoloLens and just that whole tech hologram, the idea and the tool, being able to they show like 3 people standing around an object. Basically nobody's in the same room, they're all in maybe different countries, right? And here's this widget, this product they're working on, and they're standing around and they're looking at this thing and they're pointing and drawing and collaborating, and they can all see each other, but nobody's even in the same room. It's a little bit off the rails. I think that's what I said to my guys. I said, Microsoft has gone off the rails, check this out. But it's amazing. That's what I love about what we do, technology. I mean, it's just, if you get bored easily, get into technology because it changes like the weather, right?
Yeah. So, and the funny thing is, like you say, Microsoft Rails, they started building this tech. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, all the large tech players, they started building this technology like 5 years ago. I remember when Google first released the glasses, and it was a complete disaster because people are like, it's against our privacy and so forth. It's been in motion for a long time. The pandemic has just accelerated it because it's now being accepted by human beings, that it's now a part of our life. Where I think previously it was like, oh, we don't want that. That's too far-fetched. That's like sci-fi. That's like reading a book, watching Star Trek or something. It's like, no, we don't want that in our life. I think pandemics allowed it to be accepted, and then it's accelerated the whole process of adoption, which I think is really cool to be a part of. How do you see that as an opportunity for your business? Because how do you go from, what we did, let's go back 15, 20 years, we sold hardware. We made, sometimes 40% margin on selling hardware. It doesn't exist anymore, right? And so how do you go from selling hardware and selling servers and maintaining old things? Everything's online now, everything's cloud-based, and you've got this new tech coming out. Do you see your MSP, the Msp industry, transitioning to supporting this new technology? Yeah,
boy, I got a bunch there. And this has been like this for a long time, especially being in the industry for a while. Do you remember ASP? It's active server pages. Well, it didn't used to be ASP like that. It used to be application service provider. And it was like, you may remember this, where it was, the concept was somebody would have a server and maybe terminal server Citrix, and they would host all your stuff and you would remote into it and you wouldn't have to run your own infrastructure. I mean, sound familiar, right? And it was going to take over. We're all going to be out of a job. And this was before I bought Passkey. And like, it's the end of IT as we know it for our kind of companies, It's almost like independent insurance. I don't know if you ever worked for any independent insurance agents. You know, it's like everything's going to become Geico and Progressive and major carriers, and they're all going to go the way of dinosaurs. And somehow it doesn't happen. And we're still here, and independent insurance agents are still here, you know? So the way I look at it is I try and stay above the fray, right? I try not to commit too deep, like make my own backup product or become like 100% a reseller for some phone company or throw all my eggs into one basket too much because of how quick stuff changes. Just try and stay above the fray and be in that trusted advisor, consultant, guide, you know, like watching everything. I don't know, you just have to be. And so, yeah, I mean, did we lose all of our small business server revenue? Sure. I mean, and do we not make as much off Office 365? I mean, maybe not margin, but consulting is as strong as ever, and it's better margin. Obviously, you know, labor and consulting is better margin than even maybe back when you're making 40 points on a router. But yeah, you're right; those days are long gone. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, I mean, we gotta be nimble, and we have to learn quick because, and I would put you in the young category. But for myself, there's a lot of people out there that are young and hungry, right? And they're in there and they're looking at our stack and they're saying, you should be on 365. Everybody should be authenticating to P2. Everything should be in identity and data management protection. You should be tagging documents so they can never leave. You should have this Cloudflare, not Cloudflare, but Checkpoint product to be watching all bad login attempts. We'll log this, I mean, stuff that we don't even, that we're starting to dabble in, but they'll have it down and say, what's grandpa doing over here for you? You know, so you really got to be nimble and you got to be ready to change. And I just interviewed a guy and we, you know, it's a question I ask a lot is, are you ready for, not ready for change? Do you learn quick and are you ready? It's like, we've been learning since the beginning of time. That's what we do. We're in IT. And I was laughing about my 98 comment in Windows 95. Yeah, I mean, we are constantly changing and learning new things. I feel like this new pandemic / Office 365, Microsoft 365 is a massive shift. You know, like I remember when the internet, when the modem, like, hey, I got a modem. Hey, I'm going to get AOL. Hey, they have this internet connection sharing. I can have 2 computers use the same AOL. And, oh, I got this email here. Let's set up email. You know how that was a major shift? Major. I feel like we're in the middle of another major shift. And so I talk to the guys a lot about that. I'm like, we gotta learn. And I just, you ever see the movie Hidden Figures? It's about the NASA back in the 60s and the, you know, all the stuff on like the colored bathrooms and this poor woman who had to run from her high-end job all the way back to the building that had a colored bathroom. Well, there's a scene in there where they're bringing in that huge new IBM computer, takes up the size of a room, and IBM's putting it in. And she catches wind that it might be the end of their job because they are the colored computers, right? And the IBM's going to replace them. And she goes and she buys a book on she goes to the library, book on Fortran, learns it, and comes to her 30 subordinates, because she's kind of like the supervisor, and says, you know, that IBM computer is going to be able to do 126 million calculations per second. And all their jaws drop. And she's like, so we got to learn this. We got to learn how to program this. Unless you guys all want to lose your jobs. And all 30 of them are like, no, we don't want to lose our jobs. I love that scene. I was like, wow, that's kind of where we're at right now. It's like, you better be ready to pivot and learn and go big and get into this stuff, or the IBM's going to take your job. You know?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. That's a really good analogy around it. And you're right. And actually, that movie is amazing, especially from an outside person not living in the States. That reference in that movie has so many different aspects to it just to understand the culture, right? But from that particular point, it's engineers, IT engineers, willing to keep learning technology and not solving what they've always solved. And you look at the 365 ecosystem, what are companies using these days? Email, a bit of security around it. There's like 40 plus applications in Office 365 now. And the interesting thing is Microsoft's either building them or buying companies and then absorbing it and making the 365 ecosystem. It's like you need to have a full-time person on staff just to do 365 now, just to learn it and then implement it and then educate your customers about it. You're right. It's the rate of how quickly it's moving is just absolutely insane. But hey, if you've got the right mindset, which you definitely do, how do you coach, like you mentioned before, your staff to also have that mindset to then accept change, because that's what we're doing, and then learn the platform and then educate your customers about it. Yeah, super interesting. So yeah, do you have a consulting process platform, the way you have dedicated staff to it, like because it seems like that's support's always going to be there, but consulting and educating and training on all the, say, just 365 as it is, let alone let's talk about AR or VR technology that Microsoft might be releasing, and then AI machine learning. Like, it's a whole different kettle of fish that we'll have to learn one day. Yeah. What are your thoughts around the 365 ecosystem itself?
Yeah, a couple different. I mean, I would say, do I have the training, consulting, in-place support, learning? Not at all. I would love it if we had like 9 MSP owners sitting around here in a peer group, because it's like, okay, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? How do you get your guys to get certified? How do you train them? I mean, so I wouldn't say we don't do anything. We've got our lot of collaboration. So we have status meetings every day. So there's a lot of like shooting things back and forth there. We have a lot of breakouts where one guy will know a piece of technology, or we'll start using a new technology. He'll teach everybody else. I've dabbled in LinkedIn Learning. Is it ITTV or TV, something like that. And then something like that. And then there's a Skill Me Up that Pax8 is offering, and no, but not good enough. I mean, I definitely like dedicate even more to training, and then finding outside resources, peer groups. And I've got a SharePoint/Teams guy who's really good at it. That he's actually done a couple jobs for us, and like subcontractor kind of relationship. And then just like peer groups. I think Tech Tribe and ASCII, those are the big two. Those are the big 2 paid tech groups. I know you can obviously just go to Facebook and all kinds of other stuff, but and Reddit, picking each other's brains and stuff like that. And so there's that answer. And then also funny, the company was named Passkey Computer Services for years, Passkey Computer Services. And towards the end, I kind of didn't love that, because number one, it kind of makes you sound like you're fixing computers in your basement. But also, like you say, AI, it's Microsoft Mesh, all this stuff. And that's kind of went with more of a generic, like Passkey Technology, because, yeah, there's always going to be computers, but the technology possibilities out there are just very exciting.
I don't think we're even calling them computers anymore, right? They're just devices, because we all have, 3, 4, 5 devices each, which is just insane. But I think you're right. Like, definitely the peer group mastermind is key, but we can't do it all ourselves. And I'm interested to see how this shifts over the next 3 to 5 years. Customers expect, and this might be an Australian thing, but I'm curious to see if it's a US thing too. Customers expect to go to your IT guy, go to your IT MSP, and they'll have the answers for everything in technology. It's like, sure, like it's so wide now. It's not possible. Are you finding that as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many there's like budget, having the budget, and I wish you would have told me about that, or you need to keep me up to speed on these things. And it's like, you don't want to spend any money. I mean, you won't even do there's these 5 things. These are the most important. You won't do these, but you want me to keep you up to speed on on the shiny objects,
Yeah.
Yeah, so the budget is an issue. You got to stay in front of them. You got to find the right customers. Yeah, it makes a big difference to have the right customer, and sometimes in our industry, especially when you get to a certain size, there's a lot of wrong customers, and not because they're not great people and great companies, but they're just not going the same direction, or able, like, hey, we really love this Microsoft Teams thing, and you should move everything here, and you should use SharePoint, you should OneDrive, and like you said, there's 50 programs in 365. We should try that. you need a business class firewall that's always being updated, and your employees should have training, and it's just some people that are just not there. So, and I want to say yes to every stray dog that comes to my doorstep. I'm that guy, we all are, right? And so it's hard it's hard to not do that.
Yeah, and expectation from customer at the same time. It's like juggling. This one I don't think customers understand is you're juggling so many balls at the exact same time. How do you offer the value to the customer that they're expecting? They don't realize what's happening behind the scenes, and they don't realize that just putting out fires every day, which is what an MSP predominantly is putting out fires every day, at the same time as learning, educating, staying ahead of the game, and then providing that information to customers. It's just absolutely not possible. And I think that's why we're looking more and more towards efficiency technology platforms. So this is why, obviously, where we're going with our platform is trying to really take the mundane workload away from tech so they can focus on this more value-added customer relationship service-based scenario. But then how do you then convince the customer to pay more money to then get these guys to learn to educate? It's this vicious circle. There's no answer. I don't think there's any answer for it, but it's going to be interesting to see how this generation moves. And you talk about like the new guys getting into the industry, the up and comers, the young guns, different mindset, different approach. Maybe it becomes more niche, and so an MSP does this, and then you have a consulting firm that does this, then you have someone else that does this. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the next couple of years. You're
right that expectations and customers think everything about IT or that you've got them covered. Oh, I thought we were doing that. I mean, I hear that a lot. I thought we were doing that. No, we've talked about that a couple times, and we've never done it. So one thing I could really improve on, and not even having this revelation here with you, but just I know this on a regular basis, is meeting with customers more often and having a set, like create your perfect customer, not behaviorally, but technically create your perfect customer and then compare people to it, put them up against that template and say, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. We probably should. Here's why you should. And then I think here's the key. In 3 months or 6 months or a year, come back and say, remember we talked about this? Because I get so many of that. I thought you were doing that for us, and it's no big deal when it's nothing, but it's a really big deal when it's ransomware and they don't back up their desktops. And they're like, I thought we were backing up our desktops, that kind of.
Or it's the barbecue conversations, or what we call the barbecue conversations. Maybe not so much with the pandemic, with not having barbecues, but it's always like, hey, I went to my mate's barbecue on the weekend, and hey, they're doing this in their business. How come we're not doing it in our business? Or I just assume we're doing it in ours. And you're like, no, I gave you that proposal, I gave you that quote. You didn't want to pay the money. You didn't want to spend the money on that particular item or project or solution. It costs money, does it? Yes. Oh, yeah, no worry. Don't worry about it then. Oh my God, how often does that happen? Like so often.
There's this Progressive. I'm sure you haven't seen it over there, but obviously Progressive is an American company. You know who I'm talking about?
I've heard of the name. Don't know too much about them.
Huge insurance company. And there are all these cute commercials, and in one scene, there's these it's an older couple, and it's kind of a sales guy sitting on the couch, and they're singing old World War II songs together, and they're like being all funny and joking around, and then this other salesperson comes in and goes, "Oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, Henry was just telling us all about these really cool insurance plans." And then they look up at the second, they go, "Why didn't you ever tell us about blah da 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 da?" And she's like, "I've literally told you 1,000 times." And they're like, oh, and they start singing these war songs again with this person. And so sometimes it's frustrating, like with a competitor, you'll hear like the barbecue conversation, or you'll hear that somebody came in and said, do you know that we're not doing this? And you're like, so get in front, get in front of them and meeting and like making sure you're constantly talking, I think is a really good thing to do. And personally, I don't do enough. You're muted.
How often has that saying been said in the last 12 to 18 months? You're on mute. It's so frustrating, and I just did it. And I say it all the time. Being a part of Tech Driver and with Nigel Moore, I know that it's a huge push that they try to encourage every MSP globally is book in your quarterly meetings, book in your quarterly meetings, book in your quarterly meetings, because it's not just to keep the relationship and build a relationship. It's like this conversation that can have happen around all things technology and how things are moving. It's a really good opportunity for you as an MSP to look after your customer, but then also get more work out of them, upsell them, push them into a different direction, do a project for them. Like having one meeting, it can just open up the books. And this is where I think a lot of there's a lot of money being left on the table when it comes to MSPs. And I think we always say we need to book in more meetings, we just never do. So everything else gets in the road first.
My uncle, I'm just remembering this. I'm so glad. It's so great to have conversations like this and things just they're way in the back of your head. My uncle used to create like campaigns, so to speak. He would come up with a bunch of stuff to talk about that was like the new thing, like maybe Windows 98 or whatever it was, small business server, and maybe a couple other things. And then he would just make the rounds and he would meet with every customer, and he would do that. I remember him doing that at least 3 different times in the years that I worked for him. And it was always, sometimes it seemed to happen when we were slower, when he had the time. And what a great time to drum up some business and open up the books, as you say. So
I might, I don't know if it's the internet connection, if it's my end or your end, but I think we're having a good old lag conversation. It's not too bad. You're right, 100% around just booking in. And so here's a key takeaway for you. Go to your diary after this call and lock in your next customer meeting or lock in your next 5. You'll be surprised. Actually, if this is something you are willing to commit to, do that and then come back and we'll jump on a call in a few weeks or a month from now, and you can fill us in on how they've gone and what their thoughts are around the whole innovation and the way things are going and what they're perceiving from the market. It'd be super interesting.
I would love to. It's I've really enjoyed the conversation with you, and I just love I love how collaborative our industry is. There's I mean, for the most part, almost to a fault, everybody is willing to share, wants to help each other out. It's great.
Interesting you say that. So after these 800 plus investor meetings I've been having with a majority in the US this last 6 to 12 months, that question keeps coming up a lot is what is the MSP industry like? Most investors don't understand it, right? So what is the MSP industry like? I'm like, it's a community. They're like, what do you mean it's a community? They're competing against each other. Yeah, but it's a community. Like, I don't think people understand being outside the industry, that we're all actually there to help and there to encourage and assist each other. We all know there is so much work out there for everyone. It's not like it's not like we're competing on the fact that, hey, if we don't get that client, we can't feed ourselves tonight. It's not really like that. So I think I love that about the MSP industry. I guess why I'm still in it, 15 plus years later, and you're still in it 23 plus years later. So it just goes to show that it's amazing community to be part of.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Sure is. I appreciate your time this morning for me, afternoon for you, Bret. It's great having this candid conversation. I'm looking forward to the future episodes of jumping on in and diving into a bit more detail, especially around tech innovation, automation, everything that we can, the good, the bad, the ugly of what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years. It's it's going to be super interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
I would enjoy that very much. Maybe I can do it from your studio someday.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, mate. Appreciate it. Talk to you very soon.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thanks again.
Cheers, mate.